Germany's most disturbing serial killer cases. Rarely known outside Germany. Hunted by police. Tried in German courts. Documented in chilling detail. Now told in English. Murdered in Germany. On Hardinghaus books.
Today, we're opening a file on one of the most deeply unsettling criminal cases of the Weimar Republic. But this isn't just a story about a killer. It's about a time and a place where the entire social order had just completely fallen apart. We're going to Hanover, in the years right after the Great War.
I want you to try and picture Hanover's central train station in the early 1920s. It wasn't just a place to catch a train. It was a last resort for the desperate. A teeming, anonymous sea of traumatized soldiers, men with no jobs, and children with absolutely nowhere else to go. The city had become this magnet for all the chaos of a defeated nation.
You have to understand, Germany was in the grip of hyperinflation. The money you had in your pocket in the morning was literally worthless by evening. Hunger was a constant grinding reality. And all of that desperation, it fueled a massive black market in the city's old town. It was a place where you could trade for food, clothes, anything. It was a world where everything and everyone had a price.
And in the middle of all this chaos, people started to disappear. Specifically, young men and boys. In 1923 alone, nearly 600 were reported missing in Hanover. They were just swallowed up by the city's anonymity, their absence just another drop in an ocean of misery. The system that was supposed to protect them was completely overwhelmed.
Now, amidst all this turmoil, there was a man. He ran a small business selling secondhand clothes and cheap meat, a pretty valuable thing in a starving city. The police knew him, sure, but not for what he really was. This man, Fritz Haarmann, was hunting right in the heart of all that chaos.
So to really understand Haarmann's crimes, we have to first understand his hunting ground. The conditions in post-war Hanover didn't just hide what he was doing, they actually made it possible. The city itself, in a way, became his accomplice. His victims came from this tragically vulnerable group known as the Bahnhofswaisen, or the station orphans. These were boys and young men who drifted to the station, totally disconnected from family, from society. They were just looking for food, a place to sleep, maybe some work. And that made them easy prey for anyone offering just a moment of kindness. It really was a perfect storm, wasn't it? You had an economic crisis that made people desperate. You had a psychological crisis from the war that scarred a whole generation. The police force was just crippled, totally overwhelmed. And you had this booming underground economy where illicit activities, including a pretty significant trade in male prostitution right around the station, were just commonplace. It was a complete societal breakdown. Hanover had become basically an international marketplace for vice and crime. In an environment like that, the disappearance of a few more runaways, it just didn't register as a priority for the authorities, who were already stretched to their absolute limit.
Okay, so let's turn to the crimes themselves. Haarmann didn't just appear overnight. His reign of terror actually lasted for 6 years, all while he was hiding in plain sight, operating with this consistent and brutal method.
His first known murder was way back in 1918. But here's the truly shocking part. By 1919, he had built this unbelievable dual identity. He became a trusted police informant, feeding the authorities information about the very same criminal underworld he was exploiting. This relationship gave him cover, it gave him access, and it allowed his killing to escalate dramatically by 1923. Haarmann's method was chillingly consistent. He'd lure his victims, almost always young men, from the station to his small attic room in the Rote Rehade, a street in the crime-ridden old town. And there, he would kill them with what he called a love bite, a savage bite to the Adam's apple that severed the windpipe. He would then dismember the bodies and throw the remains into the river line.
We really have to remember these were not just numbers. They were boys. They were people like 17-year-old Friedel Roth, whose disappearance was reported to the police in 1918, but the investigation just went nowhere. Or Robert Witzel, whose nice suit, coveted by Haarmann's accomplice, ended up being a key piece of evidence. And tragically, Friedrich Obeling, who was only 10 years old.
So, for 6 years, the disappearances just kept happening. How was this monster finally brought to light? Well, the answer is a combination of some grim discoveries and the work of a single very observant police inspector.
The beginning of the end came in May of 1924, when some kids playing by the river lane found human skulls. A newly transferred inspector, a man named Herman Lange, he dismissed the official theory of random drownings and correctly suspected a serial killer. But the real breakthrough was a chance encounter. The mother of the missing Robert Witzel saw another boy wearing her son's distinctive suit. She confronted him, and the trail led directly back to Haarmann, who had sold it. He was arrested, and after days of intense questioning, the whole horrific story finally came pouring out.
The trial, well, it became one of Germany's first modern media spectacles. Reporters from all over the world came to Hanover. The public was completely horrified, but also fascinated. And inside the courtroom, Haarmann, who was described as this neat, almost sympathetic-looking man, didn't deny any of it. His own words in court show this bizarre mix of self-pity and a strange desire for fame. He wasn't fighting for his life. He was demanding his own execution. He even framed it as a release from his torment and the grand finale to his novel, which is what he called his life.
After just 2 weeks, the verdict came down. Fritz Haarmann was found guilty of 24 murders and sentenced to death. His accomplice and lover, Hans Granz, who knowingly sold the victim's clothing, was also initially sentenced to death, but that was later reduced to a prison sentence, partly thanks to a last-minute letter from Haarmann himself.
Haarmann was executed on April 15, 1925. But the story, that didn't end there. The case left this deep scar on the German psyche, and it echoed through popular culture in ways that cemented his place as a true figure of horror. Maybe the most chilling legacy is this macabre nursery rhyme. Children actually sang this in the streets of Hanover and beyond. It set those grisly rumors of cannibalism to a cheerful little tune. It just shows you how deeply this case penetrated everyday life. The press gave him these mythic names: the werewolf, the vampire of Hanover. The philosopher Theodor Lessing, who actually watched the trial, wrote a famous book about the case. Much later, the film Der Todtmacher used the real interrogation transcripts for its script. And in a final, bizarre chapter, his severed head was preserved in a jar and studied by scientists for almost 90 years.
But here's the thing. Even with a conviction and an execution, the file on Fritz Haarmann is far from closed. Key questions still linger, and they point to deeper, more disturbing truths about this case and the society that created him.
For starters, we don't actually know how many people he killed. He was convicted of 24 murders, right? But those were just the cases the prosecution could prove from the bones and the clothes they found. Haarmann himself vaguely claimed the real number was much higher, maybe 50, maybe even 70. We'll probably never know.
And this, for me, is the most damning question of all. The police knew Haarmann had a criminal record. They knew he was a sex offender who targeted minors, and yet they didn't just tolerate him. They empowered him. They used him as an informant. This relationship gave him a shield that allowed him to keep killing year after year. You have to wonder, how many lives could have been saved if they had investigated him instead of employing him?
In the end, the Haarmann case is a chilling study of how a predator can thrive when the social fabric completely unravels. It forces us to ask a question that is just as relevant today as it was then. What other horrors can unfold when the most vulnerable people among us simply become invisible?